Think about the last time you had a genuinely free afternoon. Nothing scheduled, nobody needing anything, just time. You probably felt either deeply content or vaguely guilty about not being productive. Possibly both. Now consider this. Ancient humans had the equivalent of roughly 5 free afternoons every week. Not as a reward for hard work, not as a vacation, just as the natural rhythm of a life that didn't require more than 15 to 20 hours of actual work to sustain itself. The classic image of ancient human life is constant struggle. Always hunting, always cold, always one bad day from starvation. Researchers who actually went and lived with the last remaining hunter-gatherer groups found something different. They found people who had more free time than almost anyone in the modern world. So what did they do with it? The conventional image of ancient life is wrong in a specific way. The nasty, brutish, and short framing came from Thomas Hobbes in 1651, writing about a state of nature he had never actually observed. Researchers who did observe it found something else. The Kung San of the Kalahari, studied extensively by anthropologist Richard Lee from the 1960s onwards, required roughly 15 hours of work per week to meet all their nutritional needs. 15 hours. The rest of their time was unstructured. Anthropologist Marshall Salins made this argument directly in his landmark 1966 essay, The Original Affluent Society. Hunter-gatherers were not poor people living in the Stone Age. They were affluent, not in the sense of having many things, but in the sense of having enough, with time left over. The question of what ancient humans did for fun is not a strange one. Given how much time they had, the stranger question is what they didn't do. And the archaeological record answers both. The evidence of ancient humans having fun is everywhere. Bone flutes, game boards, cave paintings, decorated shells, ochre pigments mixed for no functional purpose, children's toys, handprints pressed into cave walls. Scattered across every continent, in every climate, from every period of human prehistory. We just weren't looking for it, because we assumed they didn't have time. And that assumption was wrong. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner spent years studying the conversations of the Zhuangzi people of the Kalahari. She documented something specific about the difference between what people talked about during the day versus what they talked about at night. Daytime conversations were practical: food, tools, work, logistics. Then the sun went down, the fire came up, and everything changed. Wiesner published her findings in 2014. 81% of nighttime conversation was stories. Not gossip, not planning. Stories, myths, legends, histories, accounts of distant people and events, imagined scenarios, things that happened before anyone sitting there was born. This was not idle entertainment. It was infrastructure. Story was the primary mechanism by which ancient humans transmitted cultural knowledge across generations, maintained group identity, processed emotional experience, and built the shared world of meaning that held groups together. The fire is burning low. The day's work is done. Someone begins. A story about a hunt 3 seasons ago. A story about what happened when 2 groups met at the river. A story about the first person who discovered what a certain plant did. Nobody is taking notes. Nobody needs to. The story will be told again tomorrow night, and the night after, and in 10 years, and in 100. Ancient humans didn't tell stories around the fire. They were the stories. Every night. For the entire length of human history. In 2008, archaeologists excavating Hohlfels Cave in southern Germany found a flute carved from the bone of a vulture, dated to approximately 40,000 years ago. one of the oldest confirmed musical instruments ever discovered. A second flute, carved from mammoth ivory, was found at the same site. Researchers reconstructed both instruments and played them. They produce a 5-note pentatonic scale. The pentatonic scale appears in the folk music traditions of virtually every human culture on Earth, including cultures that developed in complete isolation from each other. Celtic folk music, West African drumming, Chinese classical music. The music indigenous Australians have been playing for 50,000 years. Music is not a cultural invention. It is a human capacity that emerges wherever humans exist. Like language, like laughter, like the impulse to tell stories around a fire. Someone in southern Germany, 40,000 years ago, spent hours carving a flute from a vulture bone. Not to eat, not to build shelter, not to survive, to make sound. And then, we can reasonably infer, to play it, around a fire probably, with other people nearby. The oldest musical instrument we've ever found is 40,000 years old. The music it played was already ancient. The Royal Game of Ur. A board game found in the Royal Cemetery of Ur in what is now Iraq, dated to approximately 2600 BCE, one of the oldest known board games in existence. A curator at the British Museum named Irving Finkel spent years working out its rules from a clay tablet discovered in the museum's collection, a partial rulebook written around 177 BCE, describing a game that was already ancient when it was written down. The game is a race, competitive, strategic, with specific rules for capturing and blocking, pyramid-shaped dice, 7 distinctive rosette markings on specific squares. It is playable today, and people play it. Someone in ancient Mesopotamia made this game, not because they needed to, because they wanted to play. And someone else sat across from them and played it, for fun, 4,600 years ago, in a city that no longer exists. The oldest leisure object we've ever found wasn't a tool. It wasn't a weapon. It was a toy. In a cave in northern Spain called El Castillo, there are handprints on the wall. They have been dated to approximately 40,800 years ago. A human being pressed their hand against that wall and blew ochre pigment around it. The image it left is not a tool. It's not food. It's not shelter. It won't keep anyone warm or full or safe. But they made it anyway. The ochre processing kits at Blombos Cave in South Africa date to roughly 100,000 years ago. Deliberate mixing of pigment for no documented functional purpose, except application to surfaces or bodies. Shell beads from 75,000 years ago. The cave paintings at Lascaux, 17,000 years ago. The animal engravings at Altamira, 35,000 years ago. Enormous investments of time and effort in activities whose only purpose was visual experience, making something for no reason except that it didn't exist before, and now it does. That's the act. That's the defining human act. The person who pressed their hand against the wall at El Castillo 40,800 years ago was doing what humans do when they have time and no immediate crisis. They make something, just to have made it. The mark is still there. The hands that made it is gone. But the impulse that drove it, that's you, right now. The first art wasn't decoration. It wasn't religion. It was a human being pressing their hand against a wall and saying, I existed. This is what I look like. Remember me. Here's the part that changes the whole picture. Everything up to now shows ancient humans having fun in ways we'd immediately recognize. Stories, music, games, art. They had the same impulses we do. But there's a number underneath all of this that should genuinely unsettle you. 15 to 20 hours per week. That's how much ancient hunter-gatherers worked. Compare that to what most modern people work. 40 hours, 50. More if you count the mental overhead. We did not gain leisure time when we invented civilization. We lost it. The agricultural revolution, The thing we call progress dramatically increased how many hours per week humans worked. It reduced dietary variety. Early agricultural skeletons are noticeably shorter than the hunter-gatherer skeletons that preceded them. Smaller bodies, more cavities, more evidence of nutritional stress. Agriculture brought food security and population density. It also brought debt, obligation, taxation, and the idea, which had never existed before, that time not spent working is time wasted. The productivity guilt you feel on a free afternoon is not natural. It is not ancient. It was invented. It was invented roughly 10,000 years ago, when humans first decided that owning a field meant they had to tend it every day, rain or shine, whether the food was needed immediately or not. Your ancient ancestors didn't feel it. They were at the fire, telling stories. You're back on that couch, free afternoon, nothing scheduled. That specific feeling. Now you know what it's made of. The stories, those are still there. Every time you put on a film, open a book, or start telling someone what happened to you today. The music, still there. The game board, still there. The impulse to make something for no reason except that it didn't exist before, still there. What's new is the guilt, that specific modern feeling that leisure has to be earned, that free time is a reward rather than a right, that you should probably be doing something even when there's nothing that needs doing. Ancient humans didn't have that. For 290,000 years, nobody did. It arrived with the field, with the crop, with the debt, with the idea that you could own land and the land could own you back. For 290,000 years, having fun wasn't the reward for surviving. It was how they did it. We are the only humans in history who had to schedule leisure into a calendar and feel guilty about it anyway.